You know, a couple of weeks ago, I announced that because of the incredible kickoff that we had with Alavea, we're expanding our buy one, give one donation base to different parts of the world. We've been primarily focused on Mexico, but due to our initial success, we're expanding. I told you a couple of weeks ago, introduced a new distribution partner in Ghana, in Uganda. That's Operation Underground Railroad, which is an incredible organization that is saving kids from the sex slave trafficking business. And then they take them to the aftercare centers, and that's where the healing starts, emotionally, spiritually, and of course, physically. I'll just tell you, I was at Operation Underground Railroad this week. I flew up to Salt Lake City, spent an entire day there with their aftercare coordinator, whose name is Jessica Mass, and several people on their staff. And this could not be a better fit. These kids come out of that environment, and they said their lives have just been devastated. You know, they've had access to every kind of chronic and infectious disease you can possibly imagine. So providing ACE manning to these kids is, according to them, going to be the biggest blessing that they could possibly imagine. Here's what's also interesting, is that almost everybody that works there has come out of the field. And, you know, they started off in Homeland Security and CIA work, and now and of course they were exposed to everything there. So a lot of the people that are working there have chronic disorders. And every one of them, to a person, said, how do we get access to your product? We don't just want it for our kids, we want it for us. You know, so anyway, just a great experience this week. They couldn't be more thrilled with the association. What many of you don't know is that today is World Sickle Cell Awareness Day. And so it's very fitting that we're on the call today to introduce you to a brand new collaborating partner with the Hope Movement. And it's the Brain and Body Foundation out of Nigeria, and its founder, Dr. David Ajibade. And David and I have known each other for several years. I don't know, David, maybe 15 years now.
Yeah, just about.
David has had a lot of experience with ACE manning in the past. He's a medical doctor. And again, through Manna Relief, we worked with each other over the years. Then we kind of lost touch with each other as I was trying to explore how to get into social business and what all that meant. But we reconnected with each other about 3 years ago, right after Dr. Rodriguez had developed and donated his new ACE mannan extract technology that had 4.5 times more immune activating fractions than our original version, 4.5 times more per gram. So David and I reconnected and started talking about this new technology. And one thing led to the next, and David said, you know, I've been providing nutritional support to kids over here in Nigeria, but there's a special group of kids that I would like to try this product on because there is no good effective therapy for it. It's kids with sickle cell. And so we agreed to fund a pilot, a quality of life impact study on several children there in Nigeria. So we sent David this new version of ACE mannan that we now called Alavea AE. He did a pilot project, and as a result of the impact of that study, he's now going to step 2 in the process. And so David called me about a week ago and said, you know, I'm now working with the government. We're working on a letter or memorandum of understanding that will allow me to go to the next phase. So I don't want to say any more, David, because you're the expert from this point forward. So I asked David to come on the call. And by the way, we're going to provide product through our buy one, give model of social giving in the Hope Movement, David, whatever you need to do the next phase of your research. So I'd like you to tell everybody today a little bit about your foundation, about sickle cell, about the challenges with trying to deal with that, about what happened in the pilot project, and how the government has responded to your petition to help go to the next stage. I will say this, our products are not a treatment or a cure for sickle cell. There is no effective treatment or cure. But what we do is impact quality of life through enhancing the body's normal functions of defense and repair. And that's what best achieves quality of life impact. And that's what David is best at assessing. So David, the floor is yours. Your slides will come up when you ask for them. And here we go.
Awesome, awesome. And thanks, Sam. It's a great honor as always, just to work with you on stuff like this, and your grace, your humility, your expertise, your desire to help people all over the world is truly, truly appreciated. And I just thank you for the opportunity again to work with you. So
well, this group is going to love you, David, because of what you do. So welcome to the Alavea family, and go on with your presentation. I think you can pull the slides up now.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I will just on slides. Okay. All right. So like Sam said, we are the Brain and Body Foundation. We actually established it about five years ago. And I came back from the US about 7-8 years ago. And the goal was just to use some of the things we had found out working with Sam, working with Mana Relief and other organizations to apply them in Nigeria, because the healthcare system really isn't the best at all. And we now know for a fact that strengthening the body, strengthening the brain, strengthening the different systems can take you a long way in improving health overall. And we've been trying to push that in through the healthcare system, but also through the public as well. And we found a lot of favor with the government and with the TV stations as well. So it's really been a great ride. Next slide, please. I'll just give you a quick view of our journey and how we got to start working on sickle cell disease. And I'll give you a quick explanation of what sickle cell is. And Sam, you can chime in anytime, not a problem, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll just say a few quick things about our foundation. So basically, we have a memorandum of understanding. Basically means that we are in partnership with the government to address several areas. And we started with brain disorders, autism, cerebral palsy, seizure disorders. There's a lot of that going on. And in the process, we started seeing kids with strokes from sickle cell disease. And it was alarming to me, because I thought way back, 20 years back, when we were dealing with sickle cell disease, I thought we'd have come a long way since then, and I found out we hadn't. They were still treating sickle cell disease pretty much the same way as they were doing it 25 years ago. And so it basically did a deep dive into it, and it was like, this cannot be happening. And so we began to look into what could improve the quality of life of these kids, so they don't have crises. I'm going to explain what that means. They don't have bone pains. Their bones don't start falling out of their bodies. They don't have strokes anymore. And so that led me to, and again, I'm just going to do a quick reverse and come back again to Sam. And we started working on the aloe product that he has eventually developed. So we are currently, the approval to work specifically with sickle cell disease is on the minister's table. We couldn't get it done in time for today, but it's on the minister's desk, and hopefully within a week we'll be approved to actually treat sickle cell disease, talk about it, to train healthcare professionals. I mean, everything will just work out hopefully as we hope to work out. We also do a lot with the mental health stuff, and like Sam was talking about the slavery and that going on. We have an MOU, an agreement with the military as well. So they need a lot of mental health stuff. And again, it goes down back to nutrition and improving the quality of life of these people. So let's go to the earlier slide. I'm just going to explain what sickle cell disease is. You see a lot of pictures on the internet. Earlier slide, the one before that one. Yeah, thanks. So basically, in its most basic form, sickle cell disease is a genetic disorder that happens mainly to dark-skinned people. Nigeria is #1 in the world because we have, of course, dark-skinned people. And basically, it affects the red blood cell. And it's not just the red blood cell, but that's the predominant cell that is affected. And basically what happens is that when that red blood cell is produced and it passes through the bloodstream, through the blood vessels, the arteries and veins, and it comes under more stress than it's used to, basically what happens is it dehydrates, it shrivels up and becomes hardened. And once it becomes hardened and it becomes sickle shape, as opposed to the nice round elliptical shape and rubbery shape, once that happens, it has a greater tendency to block the smaller blood vessels. And of course, you all know what happens when blood vessels are blocked. It means that the cells and tissues after that blockage will not work like they should. They will die, they'll become dysfunctional. And that's what happens in sickle cell disease. So it depends on where the blockage is. But that's just 1/3 of the story. The other part of the story is that those same cells could suddenly just erupt, just break into small pieces and release the contents, which are not supposed to be released, like iron, like heme. And those are very toxic to the body, and they can actually damage blood vessels and damage cells, causing widespread inflammation. That's the second part. The third part, which very few really pay attention to, unfortunately, is that because the cells are this way, the blood levels are so low compared to the average person. And so we're talking about less than 30, we call it PCV, packed cell volume hematocrit. The average is supposed to be up in the mid-40s. So they are less than 30. I have several patients 20 and below. And because they are constantly have this anemia, low blood levels, it means that their organs and tissues are constantly they're living suboptimally, and so they're going to be more prone to all kinds of diseases, and that's why they die. Most of them would die before the age of 40, and that's crazy when you think about it. I mean, we have 2 to 4 million people with sickle cell disease in Nigeria, and most of them will not survive past their 40th birthday. As a matter of fact, if we can skip to the next slide after this, and the next one, 2 slides forward. Let's see if it's on that slide. The next one after that. Yes, there you go. So this is what I was talking about. So the worst thing on this slide here, well, I guess it's all bad, it's all terrible, but 50 to 70% of all children who are born with sickle cell disease, especially the more severe forms, will not survive past their 5th birthday. That's tragic. How could we have left this going on for so long? And I'll explain to you in a few slides why that is so. But as you can see, 10%, greater than 10%, will have a stroke before in their lifetime, and the peak times are between the ages of 2 and 16 years of age when these strokes happen. The people who came to my clinic, to our center, they had multiple strokes by the time they were 10, and they were confined to wheelchairs. They couldn't even move their necks. All they could move were their eyes and maybe manage a slight smile. I mean, this is a kid, for heaven's sake. So that, like I said, that really got us into working with sickle cell disease and trying to find out what could possibly be a solution. Now, we knew it could not just be with medication. Nothing against medication, but we knew that with all the medications that are being tried, it just weren't working. As a matter of fact, last year I heard about 100,000. It came out with 2 drugs from the U.S. specifically for sickle cell disease. I've been out all day having an outreach, folks. So we had a major outreach. We had the president, a representative of the president come over, and all the major stations came to film the event. So we've been out in the sun. And so if I do slow my words, please excuse me. Where was I? Anyway, we found out that we could make a huge difference, and that, okay, the drugs, yes. 2 drugs have come out to treat sickle cell disease. Both of them cost not less than $100,000 a year to treat a child with sickle cell disease. I mean, most of the kids who come to my center, my clinic, can't even afford the transportation to come to the center. And of course, we give them all the stuff free of charge, but they can't even afford it. So where are you going to afford $100,000 to treat sickle cell disease? So that is a problem. Next slide, please. So yeah, I just Sam wanted me to kind of like talk about what is the standard approach to sickle cell disease, which is what is being practiced in most centers, either here or around the world. And basically, whether it's with the clinics or whether it's with the NGOs, the charity organizations, it really revolves around these 3 or 4, 5 main things. You want to promote awareness, tell people with the sickle cell trait that they shouldn't get married. So if you have AS, if you are AS, genotype AS, your wife to be or spouse to be is genotype AS, don't get married. Well, that's well and good, but the problem is that we already have about 40 million of those people. And most of the tests, from our experience, don't work. They give false negatives. In other words, if someone is actually AS, they can go to the lab and the lab will say they are AA, which means they're fine. And so they say they're fine and they can get married. And then sometimes they do multiple times when they're young, when they're going to school, when they're about to get married, and it all says AA. When they get married, they end up with a child with SS, and that means the child with sickle cell disease, and they're both blaming each other. You lied to me, you lied to me. Is this really our child? You know, all kinds of things going on. And it's caused a lot of heartache and a lot of grief. And so yes, one way is to prevent people with AS who have the trait from marrying. But again, we're left with about 4 million people who already have been born and who are already living with the disease. What are we going to do about that? So the general treatment, obviously, they give routine meds, they give basically it's folic acid, they give an anti-malarial tablet, and then once in a while they give antibiotics. In some countries like the UK, they give prophylactic vaccination against some specific bugs, which they find to be common among people with sickle cell disease. But that's really pretty much it. And then they just wait for them to develop complications. And when they develop complications, blindness, kidney disease, bone marrow failure, the joints being damaged, well, they just treat them as they come if they can afford it. So it's really not an optimal way to look at treat sickle cell disease. And of course, in other countries like the UK and the US, the advocacy service, people advocate, they make the jobs, they try to protect the rights of the sickle cell disease patients. Not much of that happens here at all. So next slide, please. I'm going to get some water. Man, Sam, I don't know how you do it, but.
You're doing great, David. Thank you.
I got to get this. Thanks. All right. So here we come into, like we said, the problems are varied with sickle cell disease. And so we've been working for, like I said, about 3 to 4 years in this space. And really, okay, I think I'll get to that. Lagos is like the New York City of the US. Abuja, where I am, is like the Washington, DC. And we've been doing this for about 4 years, like I said, and we've been providing top grade nutrients. And I'll explain how aloe vera fits into all that. Okay, we can go on to the next one. Yeah, the last spot on this slide is a really cool one. So we went to the the government, and we said, well, listen, we can help people with sickle cell disease. A lot of the problem has to do with their immune system. Let's try. Why don't you give us an approval so we can test these in the different hospitals? And surprisingly, within a month or two, they gave us the approval. They were like, yeah, go ahead. They weren't going to give us any money, but they were ready to like give us the approval. So I guess that's good. We'll take it. So what is needed? Next slide, please. There's a bit of a delay over here, so forgive me if I take a while. So obviously we all know this. We need an approach that is holistic. It provides the solutions that are effective and work rapidly, have a wide safety margin that's really important, so that it can be administered by both healthcare professionals and non-healthcare professionals. We only have about let's see, about 100 to 200 hematologists in this whole country of about 200 million people, and then we have about 4 million kids with sickle cell disease. Sickle cell disease is not the only blood condition, so we don't have enough hematologists to go around. So there's no point insisting that people go to the hospital. People with sickle cell go to the hospital for treatment. They're not going there anyway. There's just a fraction of them who go for regular clinic checkups. Most of them are in remote areas, and they really they can't afford even the treatment that you give them. And the government does not subsidize these things. So even folic acid, which is dirt cheap, there aren't any subsidies for that. So people they are pretty much on their own. They have to find their way. Next slide. Okay, so these are a little examples, a few examples. This is what happens when the small blood vessels get blocked. The limbs, the organs, they become inflamed, and so they swell, and you can see some of that there. But we have lots of kids with severe bone pains. I mean, the long bones, in the hips, even the stomach, the guts. There's a lot of stuff going on, and you see many kids with large bellies, and of course many of them are very small, much more than their age. I've been shocked at when these kids told me their actual ages, and we see how small they are. It's really shocking. I mean, it can be a very depressing life. That's why I never wanted to do pediatrics or hematology for that matter. Next slide, please. Because it was just too depressing. Pediatric oncology too is another one I ran away from. Common sickle cell crisis. Okay, so basically, as I said before, if you go into any condition where there's reduced oxygen supply, maybe you need more oxygen. You're exercising out, you're playing with your friends, you get winded, and then you're gasping for air. That's enough to trigger a crisis that can in fact kill you. And so many have died from that. Just being emotionally disturbed or stressed could trigger a crisis. Changing the temperature, or going to get a hot shower, or going to get a cold shower can trigger a sickle cell crisis. So there are a lot of different things that can trigger a crisis. Next slide, please. So our job was to say, well, and this has always been my approach. I mean, all the time, Sam, when I was always, what fascinated me about working with you, Sam, and the others was that you were coming out with approaches that didn't directly affect the disease. They affected the body, and basically they strengthened the body. And so I was always like, okay, how can we make my brain stronger? How can we make my immune system stronger? And in that way, that should affect every other disease. Now, I'm not saying it's going to replace medication, of course not. But the body, if given the right tools, if given the right environment, will be able to do what it needs to correct, to regulate, to fix, to heal, to repair certain parts of the body. And yes, there are limits. But if you're on medication as well, it basically helps the medication work a lot better. So we actually started a company in the US when we were there called the Building Strength LLC. And that was our approach, really, to find out about these things and to teach others about this thing as well. Next slide, please. And that applies probably more than anything in sickle cell disease, because we see that in sickle cell disease, there are about four main areas. Next slide, please. Four main areas that sickle cell disease patients are conspicuously weak. And to me, it was so obvious. I'm like, why isn't anybody addressing these things? I mean, it makes me feel like I'm a superstar, but I mean, once we apply these things, but to me, it's pretty darn obvious. The first one was obviously reduced immunity. The next one, free radical damage, oxidative stress. Sickle cell disease patients have very little control because they're constantly toxic. They're, like I said, their cells are breaking up and they're spilling out toxic substances into the system, and it's causing free radical damage, and it's also causing inflammation. And so they're pretty much overwhelmed. And they're in what is known as a hypercatabolic state, because the body is always trying to fix itself. The body is always trying to replace the damaged cells, always trying to repair the damaged cells. And so it's always, so it's being overworked. Right there is a problem, as you can see, because the body isn't meant to be in that kind of state. And of course, number 4 was low nitric oxide levels. Nitric oxide is a gas that opens up the blood vessels. It dilates and relaxes the blood vessels so blood can flow through. So if they have low nitric oxide, and this happens to Black people as well. So it's a big problem with Black people. We have lower levels of nitric oxide. So if you're a Black person and you have sickle cell disease, you can see that's a double whammy. So our goal was really just to, let's go to the last slide. Our goal was really to say, well, let's start with the top, the most obvious one being reduced immunity, and pretty much work our way down. So let's start checking the boxes. That was really what I was after. I was like, okay, let's just start checking the box. But to my utmost surprise, so Sam, we had spoken with Sam a few, like you said, about 3 years. I think it's more like 4 years, because when we started the foundation, we were dealing with brain disorders. And so we got wind of what's this new product, this new technology that Sam had through Dr. Rodriguez. And we said, well, let's have some of this. Let's see how we can use that with the brain disorder cases. And so Sam shipped them over, and we used them with the brain disorder cases, and it helped. Parents were saying that their kids no longer had infections in the chest infections anymore, because it was taken care of. If you know, with brain disorders, especially cerebral palsy, they can't expand their lungs much as well because of the brain disorder, and their muscles are weak, the nerves are weak, so they're not really able to expand. And so that's a perfect environment for infection. And they found out that that was helping, and it helped them a few other things as well. So we still had that batch there, and I was like, wait a minute, if kids with sickle cell disease have low immunity, why don't we just use these on kids with sickle cell disease? And voila, shockingly, I was like, we would give them for like 2 weeks, because we weren't so sure, we didn't want anything to go wrong. And so we'll say, try this and come back in about 2 weeks. And some of them didn't come back in 2 weeks. They only came back after a month or two when their products had finished and they wanted more. And it was amazing, story after story after story after story after story. Kids, even younger adults, 21 years old, 23, 25, they would come back saying they weren't stressed anymore. They didn't have any crises. They were able to stay and finish their exams. The same kids, I know some college students, they will always have a crisis just before their exams. Why? Because they were emotionally stressed, they were tense. And so that, of course, like I said, triggered the crisis. And they would come back and say they were able to do their exams. There was no problem. Now, one of them, silly boy, he just became careless, and he just didn't take his supplements anymore. And then of course he had a crisis because he forgot to take his supplements, or he didn't come back to the clinic to get more. So bottom line was that we began to see some really, really good results with simply by boosting their immunity. And again, think about this. Think about how simple it is. These kids are dying before the age of 5. They're living really, really miserable lives. If you come think about it, I mean, I was at the the outreach today, one of the reporters, a TV reporter, comes, she's a sickle cell disease patient, so she's especially interested. She comes on a walking stick. This lady cannot be more than 25 years of age. She's on a walking stick, she looks sick, but she really wants to cover the event. And she's a reporter, so she asks all the questions. I mean, we see even worse cases in the remote areas. There was one kid who came and there was something, it looked like pus coming out of his hand. So I just thought maybe he just had an ulcer. Well, only to find out that it was actually his bone sticking out of his hand. Basically, he had had an infarction, and it basically, what is known as auto amputation, and the bone just broke off and it was sticking out. And then, well, we tried to get him to the hospital. They didn't have money. They couldn't go to the hospital. Well, they came back later and he was just smiling and he said, well, the bone broke off and fell out and the skin just healed it by itself. They face that all the time. So I could go on and on and on and on. So we can go to the next slide. I think we have a few examples. Sam, I sent you a lot of examples. You only picked two. All right. Okay. So Grace, yeah, she was interesting. She was always, her and her older brother, they were always having crises. They were always tired, complaining about everything. And you can see what we tried to do was try to really record how they improved over time. And so you can see 7 days, 14 days, looks brighter, had no stubborn pains. And for quite a while, they didn't have any crisis. Now, so once in a while, we would run out of supplements and they wouldn't be able to get, or they would simply skip their clinic visits and they wouldn't do as well. But what I found out was that they never went back to what it was before, even when they stopped taking their supplements. So it showed that there was some permanent healing and repair going on there. And so it's not just medications, you stop medications, they revert to what it was before. But with the right nutrition, it goes a lot further. So I think, is there another slide after this?
We have a video we're going to play real quick.
A video, okay. All right, great.
Treatment for sickle cell disorder is evolving over the years as some sickle cell foundations in Nigeria say strengthening carriers' immune system with vitamins and supplements is effective. This was a submission at a sickle cell clinic where patients had free consultation and counseling. The report. An estimated 50 to 80% of infants born with sickle cell disorder die before the age of 5 years. And in Africa, about 200,000 infants are born with major sickle cell disorders each year. To reduce this alarming number of deaths, another approach for sickle cell patients to live free of extreme body pain is strengthening their immune systems with certain supplements.
Can strengthen the immune system with a vitamin, can strengthen the immune system with the supplements, can strengthen the immune system with high quality nutraceuticals, which is what we use. We know that vitamin D, for instance, helps the immune system. We know that vitamin C helps the immune system.
This does not exclude the government from regulating laboratories and monitoring lab tests.
I have been living with sickle cell for the past 54 years now, and I know the challenges. We have a lot of false labs. So if they can fund proper laboratories to do proper genotype tests, it will go a long way.
While these sickle cell patients live with the cultural beliefs and discrimination from people, they rejoice for having the right treatment that breaks the cycle of pains.
Yeah, so I think one thing, David, that we talked about is you're providing your patients with vitamins and minerals and things like that. The real distinguishing factor in getting the kind of efficacy you got is when we added the extra immune support of ACE mannan. And that's really when we started seeing these kinds of benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. It works in so many other areas too, but
yeah,
been impressive.
Well, David, thanks for your presentation today. I think everybody's excited. You know, our goal through our social business platform is to, first of all, make this technology available to people in developed nations of the world that can get access to our product. Poor health is epidemic in the world. Of course, we see pandemics going on everywhere. And so the ability to impact quality of life of consumers around the world through our social business is what provides sustainable funding to reach the world's most vulnerable children. The question often asked me is, how do you get to the world's most vulnerable children? And it's through organizations like yours. So we want to thank you, David, for partnering with us. We'll provide you the best technology. You provide us the impact of those, and we will take this all over the world.
Awesome. Love it. Love it.
So you said something on the call the other day, which I think is kind of interesting. You said when we open up the abilities to start meeting again, that you would love to come over and make presentations at our regional meetings here in America. So we're going to take you up on that, David.
Let's do it.
What do we look for? Well, on behalf of everybody that's on this call today, everybody that's a part of Alavea, thank you very much, David. We look forward to a long and prosperous partnership together.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sam. God bless you for all you do.